Taylor, thank you much for your time. What were your thoughts about the Iowa State K-State game, starting with that, and then we'll move forward in how Rocco Beck made key plays for Iowa State. Avery Johnson seemed to play well, but it didn't end well.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me on. I thought if you played that game 10 times that it's probably around 500 for each of those teams. I thought they were pretty balanced. And the first half, the rain, the sloppiness, the fumbles, I was glad to see the second half where the rain stops and we got to actually see some good quarterback play. And I know Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards being out, I do think impacted them some with their play calling with Kansas State. But I really thought both quarterbacks played well. I mean, Rocco Becht had the fumble early, some incompletion issues in the first half, but Rocco Becht delivered the ball really nicely in the second half, had some really good downfield throws. And then Avery Johnson, I thought played really well. I mean, he was efficient. Iowa State's scheme did a nice job of trying to keep everything in front of them. And Avery Johnson had to be patient for most of the game. He had a couple home run balls in the second half, which one of them was schemed up. The other one was a busted coverage. But I thought from a quarterback perspective, they did a nice job. I thought it came down to those fourth down conversions. Iowa State converted theirs. Kansas State, for the most part, did not. And the last thing that I would say, and we said this on the show, look, I thought it was a bad spot on that 4th and 1 call. I thought Avery Johnson picked it up. I thought the review, there were all sorts of bodies in the way, and I can understand why the call stayed where it was on the field based on that spot. I just thought they got the spot wrong. But for Kansas State fans, it's amazing. One game and everybody freaks out. I still think Kansas State is a top 3 or 4 team in this league. I think they absolutely have an opportunity, not just to get their way back to the Big 12 championship, but I still think that's a team that if they play well through the rest of the non-conference and then in league play, this is setting up for, and we'll talk more about this later with Baylor and Auburn, but there's an opportunity if the league plays well in non-conference play for this to be a year that the Big 12 gets 2 teams in.
Taylor, do you worry about the extracurriculars that happened to Kansas State, the noise around it, or do you think that Chris Kleiman, because they usually, they win culture there quite a bit, can handle it?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that you probably internally moved on pretty quickly from because it didn't impact your team. I mean, it's embarrassing, and I really feel for Avery Johnson that he gets done in that matchup, played well, and then he's got to fly home and look at his phone and see that going on with his family. But in terms of how it impacts the team, honestly, probably within the building, that was something they were able to compartmentalize and move on from pretty quickly because it didn't involve anybody on the team. I feel for Avery Johnson that he had to deal with it, really.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's really unfortunate. Probably already feeling bad enough about just the game itself, and then you leave the field and there's all that stuff going on. I think they'll be fine. But I think Sean J. Araja also joined us, and he put it like that if anything, it's just kind of a sign of the pressure, right, that K-State's under to be a good team because they have the great quarterback and because they have a Dylan Edwards and all of those things. So that's going to be interesting to see how they handle that pressure moving forward. Not going to ask you, obviously, about every game because we don't have time, but did you get eyes on Jalen Daniels and Jim Zabrowski and what was a pretty thorough and efficient win by the Kansas Jayhawks last Saturday?
I did, and I thought Kansas fans should be really encouraged, not just by the offense and how they looked, but I thought their defense looked really good as well. Jeff Zabrowski, I thought he deserves a ton of credit for. A year ago, it felt like Jalen Daniels and that offense had regressed under Jeff Grimes. And under Zabrowski, I thought they played to Jalen Daniels' strengths early and often. And what I mean by that is there were so many looks where play action was either off of an option fake or zone read fake, and they mixed up where either a back was leaking out on a wheel route or a back was in the flat. And they did a nice job mixing up where the attack was going to come from. And you're able to do that because Jalen Daniels is a good athlete. And early in the game, he popped about a 25 or 30-yard run. And if they can do that, while also my only complaint for Kansas is to try and take some hits off of him. He got a few shots in that game. And, it's against, Fresno State. As they move into league play, you got to try and keep him upright and keep him healthy. But I thought it was a really encouraging week 0 for Kansas as well.
Taylor, you are a part of that show I mentioned now, Inside the Big 12, and you had Todd McShay as a guest. What did he say
about the quarterback play with obviously Arnold at Auburn getting his debut and Sawyer Robertson back after getting a lot of reps and putting up some huge numbers last year?
Yeah, well, I think Sam Levitt gets a lot of the headlines, and for good reason, in the Big 12. But the under-the-radar guy that he mentioned that doesn't get enough love right now was Sawyer Robertson, and that he's got an opportunity this season to really play his way into not just a fringe draftable guy, but somebody that you're really looking at on maybe not first round, but day 2 kind of boards in next year's draft. For Jackson Arnold, we said this on the show. I think Baylor has the edge at quarterback, and it's a clear edge right now. I think how Sawyer Robertson played in the back half of the season versus what we've seen so far from Jackson Arnold and his turnover issues and fumble issues, to me, I don't think there's any question. I think this matchup is going to come down more to what Auburn has done in the portal and over the last couple of years of Hugh Freeze and building up their offensive and defensive line. I think it's overlooked. I think this is a top 15 or 20 roster just in terms of the big boys. And that's going to be, to me, where this game is won or lost. But for Baylor, look, I love, if I'm a Baylor fan, I love the position that they're in right now. You're a home underdog, and you've got so many key pieces that are coming back, led by your quarterback. I think they're in a great spot to surprise people. And I said it earlier, I think this is the most important game this weekend for the Big 12. I think it's one of the top 3 most important non-conference games they have this season, because I think Auburn will end up being certainly above 500, but a pretty good team out of the SEC. And these are the kinds of games that the Big 12 needs if they're trying to push for getting beyond just one team in the playoff.
Taylor, what game outside of Texas and Ohio State are you most excited for this week?
Clemson LSU, just from the quarterback perspective. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik, you've got everything that you want out of a college football game you're going to have here. And for LSU, I mean, we've seen them lay eggs the last couple of years in these week 1 matchups. They did it in the Superdome a couple of years ago. They did it in Vegas last year, blew that lead against USC. Can they go get one on the road against a really talented Clemson team that has, what some people think may be the Heisman frontrunner, or certainly one of the Heisman hopefuls in Cade Klubnik? That to me is the one, other than the early game that you mentioned. And then also throw a little bit of an outlier out there, but for Monday night, I am fascinated to see Bill Belichick as a head coach in college. I can't believe he did it. I can't believe he's in our sport. I'm so glad that he is. But there's 70 new faces on that North Carolina roster, and just for a pure entertainment, I don't care what happens in the game. I hope it's a good contest, but the entertainment value, I think, is incredible that Bill Belichick is in college football.
Yeah, no, it's wild, and it is a very fitting way college football doesn't always schedule, I think, the best all the time, but having this is like the nightcap to the first official weekend, I do think was well planned by the TV networks and whatnot. So, Taylor, this is kind of broad, but there's just so many quarterbacks and so many different games and matchups to talk about. Who are just a couple guys maybe that are getting too much love in your eyes or not enough love in your eyes? Just kind of set the table for us as quarterbacks that are sort of on top of mind for you, whether they're the most talked about or the lesser talked about. And just give us kind of, I guess, some insight on where your head is when it comes to the position and just some of the guys that catch your interest here as we get started.
Well, one that'll go under the radar because they're playing an FCS team on Thursday night, but it's where I'll be. I'm curious to see Connor Wegman coming from Texas A&M. He's going to be Houston's quarterback this season. They are extremely high on how he's performed this fall camp. I got a chance to spend some time around him this summer at the Manning camp. It seemed like a great kid, somebody that you would want to, have be your quarterback and play for. So I'm curious to see him in person. I think the other guy that I'm fascinated to see late Saturday night is Nico Iamaleava at UCLA. I think that he is quietly, with how big this Saturday is, that matchup against Utah has kind of gone under the radar a little bit, which is crazy because Utah, UCLA, standalone window in the late night slot, I think is one of the best games of the weekend. And for all that was made of him leaving Tennessee and Tennessee feeling like, not that they were okay with him leaving, but that they were going to be okay, I'm curious, how does he step in? And what does Utah look like trying to bounce back off of 5-7 a year ago? But those are two guys that I'm curious to see. There's so much good quarterback play that's going to be out there this weekend. This may be the best week 1 we've had as far back as I can remember. But I would say those are two guys that I'm really curious to see.
I had this last week, and we didn't get a chance to get to you. Get the question to you. Mountain View cross-country runner in the chat room. Will you please ask Taylor, will be the biggest challenge of BYU's quarterback, and now we know Bachmeier, to overcome learning the wide receiver routes, learning rushing with the offensive lineman, or being a rookie in college football?
Oh, I think anytime you have a true freshman quarterback, I think the biggest challenge is always protection. I think figuring out how to make sure that they know where defenders are coming from and getting rid of the football is the biggest challenge for freshman quarterbacks. And I think for Bear Bachmeier and any freshman quarterback that has ever played the game, you have to know when, if the play is blowing up and things are going crazy around you, to get rid of the football or take off. And that, to me, is always the marker of when you watch a freshman, how do they handle it? You know, I think about Dylan Raiola at Nebraska a year ago, way too many times trying to make too much happen. Avery Johnson had the same issue late in the season for Kansas State. That, to me, is the number one thing that I look for. Do they get you beat? Because as a true freshman, even going all the way back to Colt McCoy, when he played as a redshirt freshman, there were so many good players around him. And the best players, think about Trevor Lawrence also, the best freshman quarterback, they tend to have really good rosters around them. And you look at the end of the year and you realize maybe they didn't really ask them to do too much. I think that's where staffs and play callers get in trouble when they've got a young quarterback. It's overloading them. And the last thing I would say on Bachmeier is I think it's hilarious that he wears number 47.
Yeah.
Look, how are you in favor of quarterbacks going above 19? I am. I think it's great. Let's go Doug Flutie. Let's, I know Otto Graham back in the day wore 00. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm all for the crazy numbers.
Yeah, I am generally in favor of anything that's entertaining in college football. I mean, this is a sport. It's played by you guys are still kids in a lot of respects. I don't care what number they wear. It's not the NFL. You don't have it's kind of stringent rules around this. For the most part, as long as it's still entertaining and they're trying to play good football, I don't care what they do. So I'm all for it.
Hey, man, enjoy your broadcast. Axum Jacks against Houston, who I think that's obviously going to be too much for them to handle. But Colby Carthel's got a pretty good team back from last year, so that'll be fun. Houston, though, with Willie Fritz and company should roll. Thanks for your time, and enjoy the game on Saturday, too, and thanks for your time every week.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Enjoy week one.
Taylor McHargue, ESPN.